How do you describe a stadium that can host rugby league and stock car racing in the same week? A venue that has hosted 100,000 plus crowds and far, far less. A place that has welcomed champions from Speedway to Super League to tennis, heck, even the Harlem Globetrotters stopped by once upon a time. It's not always been easy for Odsal Stadium in Bradford, England. There has been a fair share of high highs and low lows over 90 years, with a few ambitious redevelopment plans sprinkled in, none of which get over the line. There's no denying it does look a bit rough in 2025, yet that adds to its charm. Who needs prim and proper when you're hosting Yorstox banger races followed by a Bradford Bulls game? How do you accurately describe a place like Odsal Stadium? It's interesting. In fact, it just may be the most interesting stadium in the world.
And they play in an iconic stadium. It's a little bit, what's the fair word to say? It's a little bit shabby.
When Major League Baseball announced the Speedway Classic and unveiled some renderings, everyone got excited. It's going to be so cool. Then it actually happened, and it was one of the worst experiences imaginable. Maybe they should have taken some notes from Odsal Stadium, a venue that has hosted racing, rugby league, and a hell of a lot more over the years, regularly might I add, not one-offs, but doing it on a weekly basis. Dubbed Wembley of the North, it was indeed the largest stadium in the north of England. Ironically enough, it was an event or a result that happened at Wembley, which would lead to Odsal's finest hour. A fairly meh tie in the 1954 Challenge Cup final between Warrington and Halifax at Wembley meant a replay would be in order. Odsal just happened to be the venue for that replay. It should also be noted what a rare occurrence it was for the Challenge Cup final to have a replay. There is only one between 1946 and 1981, and it just happens to be this one in 1954. So the city of Bradford turns up en masse to see this historic rugby league occasion. The official attendance was 102,569, but most reports, including those from the police, say the crowd had to have been at least 120,000. It is absolutely wild to look at pictures of this today and just see every sort of safety violation ever, and no one has a care in the world. It should also be mentioned, neither side is the home team. Bradford Northern, the side that played at Odsal, is not in this game. It is Warrington and Halifax. Halifax actually being a fairly large rival to the Bradford side. While the official attendance for the 1954 Challenge Cup is no longer a rugby league record, that would be broken for the 1999 NRL Grand Final. Unofficially though, it's still recognized as being the highest attended game in rugby league due to that 120,000 number. The thing is though, with Odsal, this is only one of a number of historic firster records it does hold. It broke norms by scheduling Sunday rugby league games, something of a taboo in the 1950s. It would also be the first stadium in the north of England to install floodlights, with Bradford Northern beating New Zealand in October 1951 in the North's first floodlit game. Opened in 1934, Odsal Stadium was always a bit different, built primarily for rugby league. That alone wasn't always enough to make the venue money. So in the late 1930s, when baseball was growing in popularity across the north of England, by the way, almost exclusively for gambling purposes, just know that it wasn't a love of baseball, they were just betting on it, the Bradford City Sox would play some games at Odsal. Also, England once upon a time had a bunch of county leagues under the banner of the National Baseball Association, or NBA. That's a bit of a trip to see. In 1939, a massive tennis exhibition was held at Odsal with Don Budge, the first player ever to win a Grand Slam, as well as Ellsworth Vines taking part. By the way, when you look at video of this, you might assume it's being played sometime in the late autumn, maybe early winter months. Nope, that is mid-June in Bradford. During World War II, Odsal would serve as an air raid precaution center, and the dressing room also doubled as a map room. Speedway would join the Odsal fray post-World War II, and it was hugely popular early doors. Crowds of 20, 30, sometimes pushing 50,000 turned up to support the Odsal Boomerangs. It has been reported the early days of Speedway at Odsal saw the facility have square corners for riders to navigate. That was actually the cause of a fatal accident, which would lead to a more circular, rounder track being installed at the venue. Of course, this ends up cutting into the corners of the pitch, something that has been an issue for the decades that followed. Speedway at Odsal ebbed and flowed in popularity over the next few decades. Teams came and went before a 1980s revival coinciding with a major renovation to the stadium that saw it host the 1985 Speedway World Championship. It did so again in 1990. Also around this time, Bradford regained its very own Speedway team, but by 1997, that would leave. Well, Speedway was coming and going and coming and going from the 1940s all the way through the 90s. The one constant at Odsal just happened to be Rugby League. This served as the home ground for the Bradford Bulls, although in their early days they are known as Bradford Northern. They have actually gone out of business on multiple occasions throughout their history, only to be immediately revived afterwards. Less than a decade after 100,000 people showed up for that Challenge Cup final, a reported 324 paid turned up to see the hometown Bulls. In 1963, it would actually be this incarnation of the Bulls' final game. In reality, the team hadn't been particularly good outside of winning 3 Challenge Cups during the 1940s. By the 1960s, they are just stuck on the butt end of the Rugby League Northern table, and they don't even finish that 1963-64 campaign. Bradford Northern does return a few months later. Results improved during the late 70s and early 80s. However, it was Y2K that would see the newly christened Bradford Bulls, the team changes its name in 95, become a true force in English and really global rugby league. It was straight up Bull mania. The likes of Leon Price and the awesome foursome of Joe Vagana, Stuart Fielden, Brian McDermott, and Paul Anderson led the Bulls to multiple grand finals and multiple World Challenge Cup wins. Sadly, Odsal Stadium didn't host all of this glory in the early 2000s. In fact, in the 2001 and 2002 season, the Bulls would play over at Valley Parade, Bradford's other stadium. The reason? Well, they needed to move out so a new venue could be built on the site of Odsal. That new stadium isn't happening, but we'll get into that part of the story in a bit. As for the Bulls, the highs of the 2000s give way to the absolute lows of the 2010s. The side runs out of money. They go into administration on several occasions and are liquidated in 2017, reformed again, of course. After the 2019 season, the club's new ownership group, I mean, they've had countless owners over the years, but this version of Bulls ownership say they can no longer afford to keep playing at Odsal. The costs are just way too high. Maintenance and upkeep was no longer worth it. Of course, the 2020 season isn't much of a thing for Super League or really any sports league. And then during the 2021 season, very much early doors, the Bulls announced they're going to return home to Odsal after what was, I think, like 6 games away in total. A return to their spiritual home just felt right, and the Bulls continue to play there to this day. And given the shenanigans unfolding in the British Super League right now, the Bulls could actually find themselves back in the top flight once more at Odsal Stadium too. That would be cool. The return of the Bulls in 2021 actually coincided with the return of auto racing, another long-term fixture and somewhat a needed nuisance for those running Odsal Stadium. Stock car racing has been held here dating all the way back to 1975. And since then, going all the way back to day one, they've always had issues with cars somehow driving on the field. I mean, it's not surprising, especially that original early track. It was designed for speedway and motorbikes, not necessarily cars. Not only were they destroying the corners, but these things were tearing up the touch lines too. The track does get widened in the 1980s to better support auto racing, although it doesn't completely eliminate this problem. The 2020s revival has done a better job of protecting the field. There are more barriers. Cars just can't find their way onto the grass. We already mentioned how Speedway never returns after 1997, and it was a similar story for auto racing. The last races are held at Odsal in 1997. This is related to the Bulls and new stadiums. We're getting there, trust me, but I want to talk a little more about racing because it was revived thanks to Yorstox and Steve and Jackie Rees, who saw the history and potential of this venue and wanted to bring racing back to it. They found a way to get the shale track reinstalled after it had been removed in the 2000s. These days, it hosts quite a few different racing classes, everything that Yorstox organizes. You get more high-end British Stock Car Association F1 and F2 to the banger races, caravan destruction, monster trucks have even rolled through on occasion. Importantly though, if it wasn't for the racing, then the Bulls probably don't return. Having racing and rugby league helps make this a financially viable facility, and there's a reason why these two have always been intertwined. Outside of that though, there have been a heck of a lot of one-off events to roll through over the years. We already talked about baseball and tennis. In 1957, there is a famous match between the Harlem Globetrotters and the Texas Cowboys at Odsal. The team would also return for a visit in 2012. Every once in a while, a big wrestling event would run Odsal. They've also done more recently smaller wrestling events in the South Bank venue, that big, fancy, highfalutin hospitality area behind one of the end goals. Really though, if there was a sport to be played, they probably hosted it at Odsal over the years. Well, not just rugby union, but that's a whole thing. Actually, I kind of take that back. There was, I guess, an exhibition between a rugby union playing side and a rugby league playing side. But yeah, Odsal's had a little bit of everything. Women's footy has been there, both league and association football, in case you're wondering. Actually, speaking of association football, Bradford City, Bradford's football club, would also play a few games here in the 1980s. That was due to Valley Parade, BCFC's home ground, having been destroyed in a fire. There aren't a lot of fond memories of Bradford City playing at Odsal, but it is the site of, pardon my colorful language here, but it's the only way I can describe it. It is the site of one of the most fucked up things I've ever seen when it comes to sports. Leeds United fans, being Leeds United fans in the 1980s, begin setting a grass fire in the terrace. People try to come and put it out, both police and fire officials. They get pelted with stones. Then those Leeds United fans decide they're going to burn down some trailer selling chips. It's a ridiculous scene. Even more so when you realize the Valley Parade fire happened a little over a year ago. This is not some one-off thing. This is a fairly horrifying thing for those Bradford City fans to have to deal with after having seen 50 plus people perish in that Valley Parade fire. The Bantams do return to their new and improved Valley Parade a few months later, and that's a cool looking stadium in its own right. And how can you not love the history of Bradford City over the years? Des Hamilton, Dean Windass, anyone? The biggest what if for Odsal Stadium over the years was the Superdome proposal that would have seen it converted into this massive domed facility. Essentially, it's what Millennium Stadium in Cardiff would become. Unlike that project, though, the Superdome at Odsal is just an absolute joke. It never goes anywhere. People spend an inordinate amount of time talking about it, only to do absolutely nothing. Several people came through to say they would fund it, and then they never come through with the money. The council refuses to let go of the project so much that it just becomes a running punchline as the 1990s progress. The thing is first floated in 93, real plans are unveiled in 95. In 1997, with no progress having been made here, they announce who's going to manage the hotel and cinema at the project, despite no one building anything, despite there being no money to build the Odsal Superdome. It's just ridiculous stuff. Then in 2000, someone convinces the Bradford Bulls, hey, we're going to build some sort of stadium. It's not going to be the 80,000 plus seat Superdome, but there's going to be a new facility built here. So why don't you go play at Valley Parade for a couple of seasons? And the Bulls do oblige. Nothing really happens. The stadium plans get binned. They do build the cool looking hospitality area at Odsal Stadium. So I guess that is something, but new stadium was never forthcoming. Of course, it wasn't just rugby league to be displaced. As I mentioned earlier, Speedway and auto racing were moved out of Odsal and did not return until 2021. That led to a lot of the Bulls' struggles in the 2010s because that was such an important part of funding the maintenance and upkeep of the stadium. Without racing there to chip in with rents and maintenance and all of that stuff, it became quite a drag on the Bulls. This is also one of the key features of Odsal. It is a true multi-purpose facility, not just in that it can host a bunch of different things, but everything is important to the financial ecosystem that it has built. It can't just be a singular home for a singular team. It needs to have stuff going all the time. Now, the ambitious Superdome project wasn't the only attempt to redevelop Odsal Stadium over the years. A few of these projects do move forward. In 1980s, they redid the main stand and widened the track as part of their efforts to host the Speedway World Championship. Other attempts, such as the Super Bowl design, totally different from the Superdome by the way, never gained any traction. A few years back, the Bulls and the city council tried to move forward with another 20,000 plus seat covered venue for rugby league at the site of the current Odsal Stadium. That doesn't move forward, and those plans are eventually shelved like quite a few of the previous ones. Let's be honest, I love the history, I love the story, I love all of the interesting things that have happened at Odsal Stadium over the years, but we do need to face the fact it is a facility nearing the end of its life. At least in its current form. It's sad, but also understandable. All good things must come to an end. And realistically speaking, I can't imagine anyone who was involved with the design or development or building of the original Odsal Stadium all the way back in the 1930s thought it would still be alive and kicking some 90 years later. And here it is, still chugging along, hosting sporting events and providing value to this community. It also is one of only a couple combination raceway sports stadiums left in the United Kingdom. There's no sporting facility out there in the world today quite like this unique beauty. From what is unofficially the largest ever rugby league crowd, to tennis, Speedway, to the Globetrotters, to whenever Yorstox organizes its next banger race. It is a place. It is a destination sporting fans should truly cherish. There's never ever going to be another Odsal Stadium. And believe it or not, this video only scratches the surface of the history to be found on this field, on this track, in these stands. Not bad for a dump. Oh yeah, before this was a stadium, Odsal was just a landfill. Nothing more than a place for trash, yet it's become Bradford and I would like to think the world's treasure. If things break right too, it could just be holding the Bradford Bulls in the Super League again next season.
Once again, there's anticipation crackling in the air.
Odsal Stadium has seen it and done it all over the years, and when you sit down to think about it, I just don't know if there's a sporting facility out there that is as interesting as that one in Bradford. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to learn more about some of the weirdest, wildest stadiums in North America's West, check out the video in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. Until next time, I'm Cheyenne Hollis. This is The Touchback, and as always, hashtag take it out to the 25.